There are some realities that you have to face. And one of the realities will be a lot of associations that you have did not mean good for African people in the beginning. Didn't mean good. But bear this in mind, that before we had the Roman Catholic Church, and before we had the Greek Orthodox Church, and before we had the English Catholic Church, we had a church called the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. And that is the center pole of Christianity. Not Rome, not the Anglicans, no, Christianity. Oftentimes people say to us, you are dressing like the Romans. And I'll tell them, you fasten out of place. The Romans are dressing as the Ethiopian Orthodox. Because it was the history of the Greeks and the Romans and others going to the African continent and stealing everything that they had and coming back and claiming it as their own. And to this day, we believe that a lot of things that are acceptable are really acceptable from them and not our origin. God, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, did not start civilization in Europe, in Asia. He selected a place called Ethiopia, because in those days Africa was not the name of the continent. And all the places that we see now that we call the Middle East is all part of the African continent. So where we call Jerusalem now is really part of Africa. If you read your scriptures, those of you who do, you will have a sense that all that place called Egypt, all that place called Ethiopia, all that place, even India, was part of the African subcontinent. Ethiopia first called in the Bible, India is the second one. But we became confused when a certain place called the Suez Canal was cut in the 19th century. And once the Suez Canal was cut, then people like Egypt started to become the Arab state of Egypt and not of Africa. So I would say to you all today that when our foreparents came to this part of the region, they came either Islam, because Islam was started in Africa. They came either as Christians, because Christianity started in Ethiopia, or they came as Orishas, the traditional African religion. Our foreparents were not only from West Africa, because that's what the slave master taught us, that we came from Nigeria, we came from Ghana, and we came from Senegal. Those are only the ports for our foreparents to come to this part of the region. But for months in captivity, they would have had to walk from wherever they are captured to the West Coast. Either to Ghana by Cape Coast Castle, or to Elmina Castle, or Christendom Castle. Or if you go a little south in West Africa, you may go to Gorée Island of Senegal. And those are the ports that our people were. Now when you think about what they experienced, it can make you very angry. However, when you think about their resilience and their ability to survive, that today you and I could be here, you don't get angry, you get respectful. Islam is not an Indian religion, it's an African religion. The people we see in Israel calling themselves Jews are not Jews. They are Europeans sent to Jerusalem in 1948 to create Israel. But they are Europeans. If you want to see real Jews, you go to Sudan, you go to Ethiopia, you go to Somalia. Those are the places you go to see the real original Jews. So we were brought to this region, and in bringing us to this region, we had to subject ourselves to the instructions of those who enslaved us. We can go all the way back to 1800, 223 years ago, when a very infamous governor by the name of Thomas Picton, you all know Picton Street? Picton Street in Port of Spain was named after him, and this time it is removed because Thomas Picton signed into law on that said day of 1800, June 30th, that it was incumbent on the part of the slave master to instill Christian virtues to his slaves. And that any Negro, as written into the law, any Negro caught with any artifacts, you know, in our churches we have a lot of artifacts. We have the lota, the taria, the bells. Any such things were considered to be vessels of obeah. And the law said that we could have been charged by the constabulary. That was 1800. And then if we jump further up, about 1812, we had some brothers coming in from America, which we call the Americans. And there's a perception that they brought spiritual Baptists to Trinidad, and I say no. They brought Baptists. They brought the Southern American Baptists to Trinidad. And that was the teaching of the white approach to Christianity. When I was a child, going to Guapo Government School in Point Fortin, missionaries will come, and every little sticker they put up, a little white Jesus, a little white Mary, a white Joseph, as if when God created the world, it was created in Europe. Our foreparents, English was not their mother tongue. And I will tell you later on how amazing they survived. So somewhere in 1834-35, coming to Trinidad from London, from England, was the Baptist Missionary Society. And their job was to move our people to Christianity. And they operated out of the companies, the same companies where the Americans were. Some of you may know the Cohen and Milton School. That is out of that same company experience. However, from the teachings, we got fundamental Baptists, independent Baptists, London Baptists. And while that was happening, some of our foreparents started to go into the bush to create their own. So if you ask me today, who started the spiritual Baptist faith? I say it's an IBG. IBG meaning inspired by God. We have no name. We have the name for who started the Roman Catholic Church, the Pope. We have the name Martin Luther and what he did when he fell out with the Catholics. We have the name who started the Anglican Church. We have the name who started the Greek Orthodox Church. We have the name of the Seventh-day Adventists and all the established religions. But you cannot find one for the spiritual Baptists. And that is so because of our uniqueness. We were created in the hinterlands, away from the crowd. Tell my brother there, away from the crowd. And therefore, once our people started to become part of this new movement, the colonial establishment started to get worried. They started to become afraid, and similar to what was happening in Trinidad, a similar thing started happening in St. Vincent. So it led to the Shakers Prohibition Ordinance in St. Vincent in 1913. And the story behind that one was that our people were singing in their traditional wayside service, and the governor heard what was going on, and he went on his white horse, as we were saying local parlance, he went to make a mako. And when he was observed, the drummers started to cut the drums in a very special way. And his horse reared up in the air. And he fell on the ground. His anger led to the Shakers Prohibition Ordinance of St. Vincent. And we got a copycat ordinance called the Shouter Prohibition Ordinance of November 28, 1917. Shouter has never been our name. Shouter was given to us as a condemnation of what they consider to be our behavior. Because we were saying we shouted last night, we shouted the night before, yeah? And we will make a lot of noise. Because as we stamp our feet, the rhythmic motion of stamping our feet makes a spiritual difference. And the established churches really didn't like that. In those days, there was no difference between church and state. If I had to write a letter to the king, I had to write His Holy Catholic King, X, Y, or Z. No difference. So, we got this draconian prohibition ordinance that was really intended to wipe us out. And I thank God for our people who had a belief in what we do and decided that no law is strong enough than Holy Ghost. No law can be written to prevent us from serving our Jesus. Indeed, when Teacher Bailey was first charged for breaking the law, breaking the Prohibition Ordinance, in January of 1918, and he went to the magistracy with his Bible, cannot read English, but he had his Bible, and he asked the magistrate, "My Lord, tell me how to serve me Jesus." And the magistrate's response was, "I am not here for that. I'm here to treat with you breaking the law." So Leader Bailey, like many others, hundreds, had to face the court over years for breaking the law, for simply trying to serve their God. But you know what? The state broke its own law, English law. The state broke a law that is called the Toleration Act of the UK that said that every man and woman has a right of religious freedom. But yet in Trinidad, that law was enacted. And therefore, when it was repealed in 1951, there was no redress. All it said is that this act has been repealed. It was repealed on 1951, March 30th. But one day, the British government must face the reality of what it did to us. One day. It's work in progress. In honor of this current government, on March 23rd, 2019, the current government Prime Minister said that he has received our letter of request for lands for the construction of a sacred cathedral, administrative complex, and heritage park. And he further received a letter from us for lands for the first ever spiritual Baptist cemetery. They have delivered those 2 plots of 10-acre lands to us. And not only that, the government has donated $10 million to us to begin our construction. So we now have a spanking new, newly minted administrative complex from which we will be planning our sacred cathedral, planning our heritage park, planning our memorial park, planning our cemetery and crematorium as a result. And he said very nicely that given the history where the established churches were supported by the state, nobody should feel offended if the government support the spiritual Baptist. And he was of the view as well that had it not been for the prohibition ordinance, more people would have been spiritual Baptists. So this year, March 30th, we are celebrating Liberation Day. Those of you who could come down on Thursday, come and join us in Cuba, in the precincts of the Atto Stadium, and come and make a joyful noise to the Lord. Thank you very much.